Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Music Den. I'm your host, Armando Venditti. Hoping you guys are having a good night. Ladies and gentlemen, I am joined again by Mr. Jim Bricker for this episode. Hello, Jim.
Hola, Armando. How are you?
Hola, Jim. I'm doing wonderful. Ladies and gentlemen,
Good.
we are here to have an album discussion. And the particular album that we're going to be talking about today is this album right here, Forgive the Stubby Little Fingers. Steven Wilson, Hand Cannot Erase. Okay. Now, for those of you who don't know, the few of you who don't know, Steven Wilson, the lead singer of Porcupine Tree, main songwriter, basically mainstay of the band, has had also a solo career on the side, along with keeping Porcupine Tree going. He's also the go-to person for any album that you want remixed and basically reimagined. Um, and I purchased this album a few weeks ago, along with To the Bone. I got it for a good deal through Amazon.ca. I pretty much keep them in business, ladies and gentlemen. And as what happens with me, I'll give you just a little side note here. As what happens with me, anytime I purchase a CD, I fully intend to listen to it. I fully intend to sit down. In my case, I have no choice, but sit down and listen to the album from start to finish. But with me, what usually happens is something comes up and things get pushed to the back burner and other CDs get purchased. And gems like this individual here get again pushed to the back burner. I approached Jim about talking about this album because this is one of Jim's favorite albums ever. When he talks about Hand Cannot Erase, his eyes light up. He illuminates pretty much. So just a bit about the album. It is Steven Wilson's fourth solo album. It was released February 27th of 2015. It was recorded during September of 2014, released through K-Scope Records. Uh, upon release, it reached number one in the UK, number 36 in the US, and number 24 in the Canadian charts. So it fared better in Canada than it did in the US. It was produced by Steven Wilson, as all of his albums are co-produced. Um, and it's listed as prog rock and prog pop. And it is a concept album. And the story behind it is this. There was a woman by the name of Joyce Carol Vincent who, for all intents and purposes, uh, disappeared. Now, she was a woman who was very active, living in the city in London and liked by everyone and, just led an active social life. And she disappeared. And for 2 years, nobody, sorry, asked about her, not her family, not her friends. Unfortunately, her story ended very tragically. She had passed away in her apartment. And again, they didn't find her body for 2 years. So this story, sorry, uh, inspired Steven Wilson to write music that would end up becoming Hand Cannot Erase. Now, as a listener, um, this is virgin territory for me. Okay. The concept of this album is quite disturbing to me. Just the sheer fact that somebody could go missing and nobody would even think to ask about that person or go looking for that person for 2 solid years. Okay. It is quite disturbing to me. What we're going to do is we're going to talk about this album. Jim is going to go first because, again, I was brought up right by my mama. And he's going to give his view on this album and what he thinks of the album overall. And then I'm going to come in and give you my opinion on the album. So, handing the virtual mic over to Mr. Bricker. Take it away.
Okay. Thank you. So first thing to kind of clear up, I think it's unclear on whether we're talking about 2 years and 3 years. The album kind of leans in heavily to the fact that, nobody missed her for like 3 years, but in other articles it kind of says no one misses her for over 2 years. So
Okay.
somewhere
Yeah.
in the 2 to 3 year category. The reason I sort of get particular about that point is that the 3 year theme hangs very heavily over the lyrics on this album.
Okay.
Um, the so just quick backstory. My first introduction to Steven Wilson was about 3 or 4 years before this with his double album Grace for Drowning, which came out in 2011. Um, it was, I had heard the name Steven Wilson, I'd heard the name Porcupine Tree, saw Grace for Drowning in, my local record store, and it was a two CD set for like 9.99. So I'm like, I'm gonna give this a whirl. For
That's a
all the good things
bonus.
I've heard about it, it's worth $10. And utterly fantastic. I totally get where people were coming from. I then started to work back and listen to some of the Porcupine Tree material. Frankly, I prefer Steven Wilson's solo material just because I think it allows him more freedom musically and lyrically to kind of get into stuff, whatever his muse may be. Whereas Porcupine Tree is pretty, um, it's got its niche, its niche, and it does its niche extremely well.
Okay.
Um, for those who don't know, Steven Wilson has umpteen other side product projects. Um,
No man.
uh, and of course, it all a Base Communion, incre IEM, and I'm not going to IEMF, um, and
No man is another side project of his.
No Man is another, and there's another one with the guitarist and vocalist from Opeth that slips
Storm
my mind.
corrosion.
Storm Corrosion. Thank you, man. I need more coffee. I need more sleep. I don't know what it is. But anyway, Steven has all these other outlets to explore his musical wanderings, and he has a lot of them. Um, but Hand Cannot Erase really um, stands out for me as kind of the most mature, compelling, diverse, um, emotionally striking work in his entire discography. The you lay the story out very well, Armando, that it's based on the woman who was found dead in her apartment, Joyce Carol Vincent, and it inspired him to write this work. And it's disturbing because of just the overall theme. And it's not clear to me whether she took her own life in reality, or whether she died for some other reason. I don't know what it is. The album seems to allude the fact that she took her own life and that she had some sort of mental illness that was driving her towards that, but I don't
Mhm.
know for sure. Um, but and those themes are definitely disturbing,
Yeah.
but there's there's an emotional depth to this album that really makes it kind of stick for me. Just the themes about um, kind of self-examination, of your life and where is it going, dealing with loneliness, um, relationship with family and friends. Um, and the other thing about this album is that it's kind of told out of sequence. So, you kind of start at the end and you end up back at the end, and in the middle points, there's all these pieces in between that kind of try to fill in the pieces of the puzzle, if you will.
Yeah.
And there's a particular song on here called Routine, which I I don't know how many times I've cried listening to this song, because it's
Yeah.
about the her mother, the mother figure in this story. trying to deal with her, with life ongoing, without her child being there. And it's about her trying to get into this routine of kind of normalizing life.
Yeah, yeah,
And it's just all this, it's tremendously emotional because, I'm a father of two, and I can't even imagine what it would be like to lose one of my children. So to try to take that feeling and, transpose it onto something else, it just rings very deeply.
yeah.
Go ahead.
Just a sidebar. My mom, lo we lost my sister in 2002, at the hands of her husband. So my parents were left with the aftermath of dealing with getting back into the routine of everyday life. And
Mhm,
I can tell you right now, unreservedly, it is almost impossible to deal with such a loss, and having to get back into the routine of living your life. It is,
mhm.
yeah. So yeah, routine track number 5 on the album. Yes, that really hits hard.
It hits super hard. Yeah.
Yes,
So the emotional depth and the weight of the story is, one side of the equation. And if the music were just meh, it would still probably carry it forward just because of the strength of the emotional weight of the storyline. However, musically, this album is, as deep as it is lyrically, if that makes any sense. There is, every song is something different, but yet it works still as a whole. It's not like this jarring sense of, oh my gosh, how could you go from this to this? It doesn't have any cohesion.
no,
So even though there's a ton of variety on this album, it isn't jarring. It's not like musical whiplash where it's like, what, this doesn't work. There's a cohesiveness to it that works throughout. Some tracks sound like, you know, electronica synth pop. Some sound like speed metal. Some sound like it's a uh, John Fahey acoustic guitar piece with heavy bass pedals over it. I mean,
mhm,
it's amazing in terms of its arrangements and its complexity, but the musicianship on this album is, I think, some of the strongest I have ever heard. The musicians are superlative
mhm.
on here. The core band of Nick Beggs, Guthrie Gorman, Marco Miniman on drums, Adam Holzman on keyboards, and Steven. I
Yeah,
mean, that's the key five that pretty much go
yeah,
throughout the entire record.
yeah. You mentioned sorry, Nick Beggs. Um, for those of you out there who don't know, Nick Beggs, I did my research on it. He played bass for, of all bands, Kajagoogoo.
Did
Uh,
indeed.
for those of you who do remember the uh, hair years of the 80s, the early 80s, and the
That's right.
Too
Don't
Shy
be
and
too
all of that.
shy to admit that you do. Yeah,
Yes, exactly. Yes, yes. Pun fully intended, ladies and gentlemen.
fully.
But yes, no, apparently also Nick Beggs has been quite the session musician, like session player for other artists, not just Steven Wilson. The list fails me now. Also, Marco Miniman, you mentioned
Yeah,
on drums.
the core band on the record is, of course, Steven, who can play darn near anything, including banjo.
Yes,
Uh,
yes,
Guthrie Govan on guitar, uh, Adam Holzman on keyboards, and Marco Miniman, who dances this line between surgical precision and just sheer chaos
yes,
in how he plays. It's just
yes,
absolutely stunning
yes.
to hear his playing.
Very much so. Very much so. Uh, I, I gotta tell you, listening to this album, I listened to it back to back twice in a row. I'm floored.
It's an experience, man. Just
Eh,
listening to it once is pretty devastating.
It is draining. It is captivating because I mean, again, the concept of it, the story behind it alone, it just again, as we said ad nauseum, like at the risk of being repetitive, and knocks you for a loop, and then you listen to this album and it goes through so many emotions through the music, not even lyrically, but through the music itself.
Yes.
Like you go through peaks and valleys like you would not believe on this album.
Oh yeah, I mean the tune Ancestral, which is, kind of near the end of the album. I mean, that's
Yeah.
just a 13.5 minute odyssey of, from peaceful introspection to, you know, 7/8 speed metal headbanger. I mean,
Yes.
it's whew.
Yeah, no, it it is it isn't an experience, ladies and gentlemen, to listen to this album in one sitting, let alone, let alone twice. I mean, it's just unreal. Um, and you know, Stephen Wilson has always been an artist that hasn't always will do whatever the hell he wants to do musically. He doesn't label himself. I remember hearing interviews that he had done where journalists would say, like would compare him to, being a progressive rock artist, and he would always shy away from that label. He hated that label, being a progressive rock artist. But unfortunately, Mr. Wilson, if you listen to this album, it is indeed a progressive rock album,
Oh yeah.
right? Um, I mean, when you first heard this, what was your initial very first takeaway from this album?
Uh Overwhelming. And it was overwhelming because of the emotional content of the story and just the sheer musical variety and density. I mean,
Okay.
it's my hat's off to you for kind of listening to it, twice in a row. Listening to it once in one sitting, it's it is draining, but gosh, it's hard to explain. It's like a good draining in a way. One of the I describe one of the times that I saw King Crimson as, and I happened to have front row seats. It felt like I was being musically assaulted,
Mm-hmm.
but I'd do it again in a heartbeat, just because it's one of those experiential things that was just so unique and grand and kind of outside of anything else. And Hand Cannot Erase is like that. I mean, you know, um, if it was this lyrical theme, but it was all kind of emo throughout, or if it was all like doom metal or, goth rock or something, it would just be like overbearing. But because of the musical variety and complexity that just sort of underpins this whole record,
Yeah.
it you know it it doesn't just make it bearable. It just elevates it all. Um,
There are a lot of textures, a lot of layers and colors to this album
mhm,
that I agree. If it was just one genre all the way through, like
mhm,
speed metal, like you mentioned, or goth, um, it would be a lot to take. It'd be a lot to handle. And I'd be sitting there going, okay, when is this going to end? But he takes you on a roller coaster of emotions throughout this album. There are, pastoral textures on here. There's a beautiful acoustic guitar, the use of banjo. Okay. At the end, of one track. And to hear that track, you gotta to know what track it is, sorry, you have to listen to the album, ladies and gentlemen. Um, but he goes through so many emotions on this album,
mhm.
that to me, this album is indeed the human experience,
Yeah,
you know?
it's a tragic human experience, but
Yes.
it's eye-opening to kind of check yourself, because it's the real story about this woman is that, she had, the news stories say, she was popular, she was well liked, yet she was dead for 2 to 3 years before people even noticed it. So it's, kind of a, if you will, a cautionary tale about the need for real human contact and real human relationships.
Yes.
Um, so if there's any sort of message about, this album, it's kind of that, but it's not, I don't want to make this sound like it's a preachy record at all. It's not.
No, 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 it's not preachy at all. And I think you're right. It is a cautionary tale in that I think it says very well that we all need human contact. We all need that interaction with one another. If anything, just to keep each other in check to see if we're okay,
Mhm.
right? Because you
Yeah.
said there's no, like you had said at the top of the show, there was no um verification as to whether or not did she take her own life, was it natural causes, and if it was someone taking their own life, if she did take her own life, God forbid, or you know we need that human contact in order to the interaction in order to check on one another,
Yeah.
you know um
Hmm.
is there to you, does this album play as a whole, or are there tracks here that stand out more than others?
Well, yeah, there are definitely standout tracks. Just, hmm. Every track is in service of the narrative of the story.
Hmm.
So there's nothing that's kind of wasted on here. In fact, Stephen was doing such a, he was so conscientious about having it be something that the listener could enjoy that there were at least two tracks that he just cut off here entirely and put onto the EP 4.5, which was subsequently released to Hand Cannot Erase. I think those two tracks were performed live when they took Hand Cannot Erase on the road, and I kick myself for missing that, but oh well.
Hmm.
It's hard. I mean, there are pieces that stand out, like I said, because of the depth of the lyrics, um, you know, combined with the musicianship and the arrangements and the composition. Routine is probably the one that stands out because, like I said,
Yeah,
I've cried to that thing time and time and time
yeah,
and time
yeah,
again.
yeah,
Regret number 9 has one of the greatest electric guitar solos I have ever heard. I mean, Cage, Hendrix, Clapton, Zappa, you know, they need to just stand back and listen to what Guthrie Govan did on this tune. It is just astounding,
hmm,
absolutely astounding.
yeah,
But yet I don't go to this album because I want to hear shredding or I want to cry or I want to just take in the sonic variety of it. It's like, no, I want to have the whole experience. Lyrics, composition,
yeah,
arrangement, melody,
yeah,
the whole shooting match.
yeah. I agree with you. Uh, Ladies and gentlemen, even though Jim mentioned that there's I guess you'd say shredding on the album or speed metal, it's not s- speed metal in the turn in the way of Metallica Kill 'Em All. You know what I mean? It's not like that
Right.
at all. It is
Yeah.
very accessible. It
Yeah,
is.
Steven Wilson is way too mature of a composer to just kind of do something, because it's Flash.
Yeah.
There's resonance and reason for it.
Yes. Yes. Um, and I agree with you. As I said, this album is extremely accessible. For me, in terms of tracks that stand out, Routine is definitely one of them. Perfect Life is another one where you have the spoken word
Yeah.
piece that comes in, and
Yeah,
then you
two-thirds
hear
of that is spoken word.
exactly, and then you hear him say over just repeating, we had the perfect life, we had a perfect life, and just
Hmm.
over and over again. And to me, again, it just harkens back to losing my sister because you
Hmm.
never, and I'm sure majority of people out there would agree with this, that you never imagine that something like that would happen to you or members of your family, and you do at points in your life look at what's going on. Things are going good. You got a good set of friends, good family, a good job, a good social life. So to you, you do have a perfect life in what you think is a perfect life, what you set up for yourself. And then some foreign I guess force comes in and just disrupts that for whatever reason. And then
Right.
you're left with the remnants of what's left behind. And
Hmm.
you'd think, we did have a perfect life, right? This is what this track represents to me. And it's just perfect. It's sublime. Um, uh,
Hmm.
for me, the album does work as a whole piece. Even though we've picked out certain songs that stand out, for me, I
Hmm.
need to sit with this album again. I need to listen to it as a whole collection, and take it in and drink it in sonically and um, walk, walk away from the experience, possibly with another outlook. I don't know, but
Hmm.
it's fantastic. I cannot believe that this is sitting on my shelf for like say 6 weeks, which it has been, and I haven't even touched it till today. You, you know what I mean? Um, and before we go any further, it's been announced that he has a new album coming out, Steven Wilson, in 2025 called The Overview. And what that is, according to the notes that I've read, it's two tracks, 20 minutes each. So he has gone at this point the Mike Oldfield route in terms of Tubular Bells, okay? But and there's really not much more that is um, listed about the album. So what I do like about his work is he goes from album to album, going down a different path. You know what I mean? Not one album is similar to the other in terms
Right.
of story, in terms of content musically. Every album is its own uh musical avenue that he goes down. He doesn't repeat
Yeah.
himself, you know.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Hand Cannot Erase is very, like you said, it's very proggy, but yet it's not as proggy as the previous album, which was The Raven That Refused to Sing. So you've
Yes.
got like ultra prog in Raven, you've got, heavy prog, if you will, in Hand Cannot Erase. To the Bone, which is the subsequent album from 2017, has a lot has a lot more, I'll say, traditional pop song structures to it, just
Yes.
within its progginess. You know, the Future Bites from 2021 is like full on pop. That's where he embraces his inner ABBA freak and
Yes.
just really sort of
Yes.
lets that flag fly, if you will.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
Harmony Codex 2023, again, things start to move more proggish. I mean,
A lot of
there's one
sound.
track on there that Steven kind of describes as like spiritual jazz, which it's close to me, but it definitely stretches the boundaries. And now you've got Overview, which seems to be like, yeah, it's from the playbook of Oldfield, Tangerine Dream,
Yes.
those kinds of groups.
Yeah. The Harmony Codex to me is a lot of soundscapes and guitar textures, wall of sound. That's the only way I can describe it. I've listened to it a few times and it's beautiful, it's symphonic, it's epic, it's grand, much like And Cannot Erase on a different level though. Uh,
Yeah, right,
I
right.
mean, what I do like is on certain songs, um, you know, he'll do, he'll have like a guitar. section that will build up into a major solo and then just dead stop. You know what I mean? Just, you know, it,
Hmm.
it's almost like he's brought it to the guitar solo to him its natural conclusion. And rather
Yes.
than it just peter out, um, it just comes to almost like a dead stop. And then you're like, okay, that was big, that was grand, like what's he gonna do next? And then he goes into like a beautiful piano soliloquy, as it were, like a really
Hmm.
calming piece. So again, every track on this album, there are 11 cuts in total. The album plays for 65 minutes and 44 seconds. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to listen to this as a whole piece, invest the time. Get yourself a drink, get yourself a coffee or a tea or a plate of food, and just sit there and just listen to this because it is stunning. It's like
It
it's
is stunning.
it's nothing like you've ever heard before. That I've
Yeah,
ever
when we
heard
were
before.
putting together the list for the 31 Perfect Album series, this
Yeah,
one was an immediate lock for me.
yeah, yeah. In terms of his, because he's coming out with the overview that makes 8 albums in his catalog. And
Hmm.
have you are you well familiar with the other albums to sort of rank this at this point in time as to his other releases?
Yes, and to me, this is, the Mount Olympus. This is number one with, a huge garden wall or, castle, you know, battlements, raised around it. It's like it's just impenetrable. Nothing can touch it. In his catalog, you know, I yeah, I mean it's a perfect album to me for a reason. So to me that goes in the same categories as, Abbey Road, Kind of Blue, Asia, Dark Side of the Moon. I mean, it's
Really?
up there. Yeah,
Really? Okay. Okay.
it's flawless.
Okay. My God, that's quite the uh quite the praise for the album.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, and it's unusual for me because I'm not like that with new material. Like I mentioned in the 31 series, it's kind of like I need to kind of sit with something for quite a bit of time
yeah.
for me to really have kind of an objective viewpoint about it. But this was just so um, instantly overwhelming and just sort of in your face about was inescapable about everything that it was doing and how well it was doing it, that it wasn't something you needed to kind of go away and ponder about. It's kind of like, good Lord, is this really that good? And it's like, darn right it is.
Okay. Okay. Um,
Harumph.
you see, for me, um just a little, I guess, a bit of a mini tangent, but in a good way. I love The Raven That Refused to Sing.
Hmm.
I think that to me, The Raven That Refused to Sing is very much a winter album
Hmm.
in terms of what just the concept of the album, what the songs are about. It's very much it's a dark album.
It is.
It is a winter album. Like, I could see myself sitting there listening to this album, listen to the Raven that refused to sing, wrapped up in a blanket, you know, uh,
With Vincent Price serving you tea
pretty
or
much.
spider goulash, if that's, how he
Um,
rolled.
I I'm still grappling with this one with
Hmm.
Hand Canary Race. It is very good. It is heavy. It is melodic. It is lush. It is textured. It's all those adjectives they wanted to use to describe it. All that in a bag of chips. It is that good. I
It
mean,
is
it is that good.
with
And
gravy on
again,
top.
yeah, I'm just trying to I'm just trying to place it in my mind as compared to the Raven that refused to sing.
Hmm.
Um,
Well, there are people who hold the Raven in like the highest esteem
Yeah,
because of just how um d you know how well it sort of adheres to the prog ethos and how fantastically it does it. I mean, just the first two tracks alone, Luminol and Drive Home, are A plus 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 tunes. I guess for me, the Raven, um, as good as it kind of stays within that bandwidth. It does it super well, but I guess I'm looking for a little bit more variety. And for me, with Hand Cannot Erase, you get all the musical variety, plus you get the emotional weight of everything,
yeah.
and that just adds to the drama.
Yeah, it like this album puts you through the ringer emotionally. It really does. Uh yeah, that's why I need to sit with it more and dive into it and not so much dissect it because I think if you dissect something and if you I think if you dissect a piece of music too much or an album too much, you lose to an extent the you lose to an extent what drew you in the first place. You know what I mean? Like,
Sure, you know, frame by frame, death by analysis.
yeah, yeah. No,
It definitely can get that way.
it's true. It's true. So no, this album for me, it is good. It is very good. It is heart-wrenching. It is emotional. It is draining, ladies and gentlemen. But yeah, it is. As I grab it over here again and I show you, ladies and gentlemen, please, please, if you have not heard Hand Cannot Erase, if you have not heard this gem of an album, please do. Please take the
Hmm.
time, okay? And again, 65 minutes and 44 seconds. You know what? I listened to it twice today, back to back. It goes by in no time flat. It really does. Because the music segues into one another. It basically it's seamless. Um, even though each track is a different avenue to go down, it is seamless. It does flow together. The continuity on this album is simply amazing. And again, don't take our word for it. Stream it on YouTube, please. I mean, we
Yeah,
are not experts in music whatsoever. We just know what we like and we like to bring it to you and give you our opinion. So
exactly.
yeah, so
And
please
I just
go
want to
ahead.
kind of throw out one thing here, Armando.
Sure.
It would be very tempting to kind of go in and kind of dissect things tune by tune about like
Yeah,
what makes each tune special, whether it's how it goes into how it advances the narrative or like what's happening musically or through the arrangements or
yeah, yeah,
whatnot. But it's one of these things that I think people really need to discover on their own. I mean,
yeah.
hopefully we've done a good job of kind of pulling back the curtain a little bit on some of the magic and the power that's here. And once people dive in for themselves, you know, I think they'll get it.
No, I have no doubt. And yeah, no, I have no doubt that people will, once they listen to this album, that they'll understand what we're talking about on some level. Because even
Yep.
as we try and describe it, we can't describe it fully. You have to listen to the album to get the full effect of what you're listening to. I mean, you've got guitars going off, you've got mellotron, you've got banjo. Okay? Banjo.
Y-
So
Yep.
there you go.
I wish Bill were with us to talk about it because I know he's a huge fan of this
Yes.
album,
Yes,
and I know
Bill.
that he can add a lot more perspective on things.
Yes, Bill Schuster is a major fan of this album, um, to the nth degree. And I'm sure that when he sees this video, he's gonna say, "Why didn't?" He's gonna email me, "Why didn't you ask me to be on this panel? I could have done it. I could have done." I'm like, "Sorry, Bill. We love you. We miss you. We'll be back soon."
This
And
is true.
all right, ladies and gentlemen, I think that brings an end to this discussion on Hand Cannot Erase. And I'm going to go on a limb and mention this that before we started taping that Jim and I discussed doing a Steven Wilson album ranking. So that's going to be coming up soon. We're also going to be doing a Genesis album ranking with Bill Schuster's going to join in on that one. This was the Genesis album ranking version 2.0 was Bill's idea. And with this version of the album ranking, we are going to be including From Genesis to Revelation and Calling All Stations. So all 15 albums for the Genesis album ranking version 2.0. So when you do watch that episode, and I know you will, please grab a drink, grab a joint. If you do indulge, grab a plate of food and just sit back and enjoy. Again, I want to thank Jim Bricker for joining me on what I call an abridged episode of an album discussion for Steven Wilson's Hand Cannot Erase. Because, ladies and gentlemen, if you watch these episodes with Jim and I and Jim and Ken and I, the word edit does not apply because we seem to go off on tangents galore. Okay. And
We do.
these episodes turn into volumes in terms of putting the content together. So again, once you've heard this album, Hand Cannot Erase, please let us know in the comments, what you believe, what you believe, sorry, what you think of this album. Do you like Steven Wilson? Do you like this album? And, we mentioned other albums that he's done, The Raven That Refused to Sing, Grace for Drowning. Please let us know, what are your favorite albums of Steven Wilson? Let's get a discussion going here. Okay, guys?
Yeah.
So again, for Jim Bricker, I am Armando Venditti signing off for now. Please look after yourselves and one another, because that is what's important most of all. And please click like and subscribe and hit the notification bell to keep yourselves on top of any new content I've got coming up. There are more ideas coming up, and yeah, and it's always an adventure on this channel. You never know what's going to happen. Glasses
That is
falling
true.
off, you know, mayhem and melee's happening all the time. So again, we'll see you soon with another video. Bye for now.